Maya had always believed that her life with Arjun was calm, secure, and full of love, the kind of love that made ordinary days feel magical, where even small gestures like a shared cup of tea or a quiet evening on the balcony brought comfort and happiness, and she often smiled to herself thinking how lucky she was to have found someone who understood her so completely, someone who could make her laugh when the world felt heavy and hold her hand without needing words, someone whose presence alone made her feel safe, and she never imagined that beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect marriage, a secret could be quietly waiting, like a shadow she had never noticed, a secret that could shake the foundation of her carefully built life. Yet she was blissfully unaware until one rainy afternoon when the sky was gray and the rain tapped insistently against the windows, a gentle but relentless rhythm that matched the unease she suddenly felt in her chest as she wandered through the apartment tidying up, trying to distract herself from the nagging feeling that something was off, something she couldn't quite put into words, and as she entered the study, a room she rarely spent time in because Arjun loved it as his personal space, she noticed a folder she hadn't seen before tucked behind a row of old books, dusty and slightly worn, almost as if it had been deliberately hidden, and a small shiver ran down her spine as curiosity pushed her forward, stronger than caution, and she hesitated, thinking about whether she should leave it alone, whether some things were better left unknown, but the urge to understand, to know, was overwhelming, and with a trembling hand, she pulled the folder out and opened it, only to find papers, letters, and photographs, neatly stacked but deeply personal, each item a piece of a puzzle she had never imagined existed, and as she sifted through the contents, a chill went through her body because it was clear that Arjun had been keeping parts of his life from her, parts that he thought she didn't need to know, and each page seemed to whisper secrets, secrets about relationships, messages, and moments that weren't shared with her, and her mind raced, trying to reconcile the man she loved, the man who had held her through lonely nights and celebrated small victories with her, with the man who had hidden these truths, and a mix of confusion, hurt, and disbelief surged through her, leaving her breathless and unsure of what to do next, and she wondered how long this had been going on, how many little things she had missed, how many times she had been unknowingly kept in the dark, and the more she looked at the photographs, the letters, and the messages, the more her heart felt heavy, a weight she hadn't anticipated, pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe, and yet, amid the shock, a part of her, the part that had always trusted him completely, whispered that there must be an explanation, that maybe she didn't have the full story, that maybe this wasn't what it seemed, but even that small hope was fragile and trembling because the evidence in her hands was undeniable, tangible, impossible to ignore, and she sat on the floor of the study, the folder clutched to her chest, staring blankly at the walls as the rain continued to pour, each drop echoing the turmoil inside her, and she remembered moments that now felt different, casual smiles that might have been masking guilt, conversations that suddenly seemed layered with meaning she hadn't understood at the time, and memories that once brought warmth now carried shadows, and she felt a quiet anger rise, not explosive but simmering, the kind that comes from betrayal by someone you love deeply, and she wondered how someone could hide a part of themselves so completely, how someone could be so loving and kind one moment and conceal secrets the next, and as the hours passed, she moved through the apartment almost in a daze, touching objects, noticing details she had overlooked before, the little notes Arjun had left for her, the photographs on the walls, the books he loved, all suddenly seeming to have a dual meaning, and she felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and doubt, longing for the simplicity of before and struggling to accept the complexity of now, and she wanted to call him, to ask him to explain, but her voice faltered, her mind spinning with questions she wasn't sure she was ready to hear answers to, and she felt the ache of uncertainty, the kind of ache that makes the stomach turn and the heart beat unevenly. And she paced through the living room, staring at the rain sliding down the windowpane, her reflection merging with the gray sky outside, and she realized that nothing would ever feel the same, that once a secret like this was discovered, it altered the way you see everything. And she wondered if their love was strong enough to survive the truth, if the years they had shared could withstand the weight of hidden moments, and as she finally sank into the couch, exhausted, drained, and unsure of what to do next, her phone buzzed softly on the table, a new message from Arjun, casual and familiar at first glance, but she noticed the time, late in the evening, and a shiver ran through her because she didn't know if he knew she had found the folder. If he suspected she had discovered the hidden life he had kept, and the uncertainty gnawed at her, making it impossible to think clearly, impossible to rest, impossible to feel safe, and she stared at the phone, debating whether to open it. Wondering if that message would bring comfort or confirmation of her fears, and she felt tears prick at her eyes, the kind that came silently, quietly, without fanfare, but carried all the emotion of confusion, heartbreak, and love intertwined. And as she sat there, rain tapping the window, heart heavy, thoughts racing, she realized that she was standing at the edge of a precipice, the point where everything she thought she knew was about to shift, and she knew that the next step she took, whether she confronted him or waited, would change everything, for their marriage, for her trust, for her heart. And as the storm outside mirrored the storm within, Maya felt a quiet resolve form amidst the fear, a determination to face the truth, whatever it might be, and she took a deep breath, fingers still clutching the folder, heart still pounding, knowing that the night ahead would be long, that questions would need answers, and that the life she had built with Arjun was about to be tested in ways she had never imagined. And as the rain continued to fall, she whispered to herself, barely audible, "I need to know. I have to know." And in that moment, she realized that her life had quietly shifted, that the path forward was uncertain, and that the discovery she had made, the secret hidden in plain sight, was the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything she believed about love, trust, and the man she had promised her heart to. The morning after Maya discovered the hidden folder, the apartment felt heavier, as if the walls themselves carried the weight of the secret she had unearthed, and she moved through it carefully, avoiding Arjun's gaze, pretending everything was normal while inside. Her mind raced with 1,000 questions and 1,000 fears, the kind that twisted her stomach and made her chest ache, and every small sound, the kettle boiling, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic, seemed amplified, a constant reminder that life had shifted subtly but irreversibly. And when Arjun walked into the kitchen, smiling as if nothing had changed, Maya's heart both fluttered and sank, the familiar warmth of his presence colliding painfully with the betrayal she now carried like a heavy stone in her chest, and she hesitated, unsure how to start, unsure if she even wanted to start, knowing that once she spoke, nothing would be the same again. But the silence became unbearable, pressing on her mind, forcing her to confront the reality she had avoided all night, and she motioned for him to sit, her hands trembling slightly. As she guided him to the living room sofa, the soft cushions unable to soften the tension between them, and when he looked at her, his eyes filled with curiosity and concern, she realized that she needed to speak, to voice the questions that had kept her awake, to demand truth from the man she loved, the man she had trusted completely. And she began, her voice shaking but determined, "Arjun, I found something last night," and the words hung in the air, heavy and accusing, and she saw his face change instantly, the color draining slightly, a flicker of fear and recognition crossing his features, and in that instant, he seemed smaller, more human, less untouchable than the man she had always believed she knew, and she felt a mix of triumph and sorrow, because finally, the truth had a chance to be spoken, and yet the silence that followed was suffocating, stretching long and taut between them, a rope of tension that threatened to snap with the slightest movement. And Arjun finally spoke, not with anger or denial, but quietly, hesitantly, as if choosing his words carefully. "Maya, I didn't mean for you to find out this way." And she listened, heart racing, every beat echoing in her ears, every pause making her pulse skip, and she waited, needing the rest of the truth, needing the confession to fill the void that had opened in her chest. And then he began to explain, slowly at first, stumbling over words, admitting that there had been someone from his past, someone he thought he had moved on from, someone he had kept contact with not out of desire, but out of unresolved feelings, a sense of nostalgia and guilt he had never known how to release. And as he spoke, Maya felt the first sharp sting of heartbreak, a cold wave washing over her, because the realization that part of his life had existed hidden from her, that he had chosen secrecy over openness, hurt more than she could have imagined, cutting deeper than any argument or fight. And she remembered every small moment now with new suspicion, every casual glance, every whispered conversation, wondering what she had missed, what he had never told her. And yet, she also saw his eyes, brimming with regret and sorrow, and a part of her, the part that had always loved him completely, softened at the sight of his vulnerability, because despite the hurt, There was sincerity there, a desperate plea for understanding and forgiveness, and she wanted to scream, to cry, to throw the papers across the room, to demand answers for every sleepless night she had unknowingly endured while he carried the burden of secrecy alone, but she also wanted to listen, to understand, to grasp the full story before making a decision that would change everything, and she sat there, hands clenched in her lap, heart racing, emotions whirling, as Arjun continued, telling her about the reasons he had hidden the relationship, how he had tried to shield her from worry, how he had convinced himself that the past was over and that he could move on, but still, the letters and messages remained, a tether to something unfinished, and Maya felt tears prick her eyes, a mixture of anger, betrayal, sadness, and lingering love, the kind of complex emotions that make you question every memory, every touch, every word shared, and yet, in his voice, she heard truth, raw and unfiltered, and for the first time in hours, she felt a glimmer of hope that they could navigate this together, that love might still be strong enough to survive the revelation, if they were willing to be honest and open from now on, if they could face the parts of themselves they had hidden, if they could rebuild trust slowly, carefully, one fragile step at a time, and she realized that forgiveness would not be immediate, that it would take time, patience, and courage, but the choice to even consider it was a spark, a seed of possibility in the middle of heartbreak, and she took a deep breath, steadying herself, feeling the weight of the decision she had to make, because confronting the truth was one thing, deciding what to do with it was another entirely, and in that moment, she knew that their conversation would be a turning point, a crossroads that would determine whether their love could endure or crumble under the weight of hidden moments, and as she looked at him, seeing both the man she loved and the man who had kept secrets, she felt a tumultuous mix of longing and fear, a pull toward the warmth and comfort she had always known, and a push away, toward self-protection and caution, and she spoke again, softer this time, her voice trembling but firm. I need to know everything, Arjun. I need to understand why, I need the whole truth, and he nodded, swallowing hard, eyes glistening with unshed tears, and for the next hours, they talked, slowly unraveling the threads of the past, the hidden messages, the letters, the photographs, each revelation a blow and a bomb at the same time, and Maya felt herself shifting through a storm of emotions, anger at the secrecy, sorrow at the betrayal, love for the man who was standing before her, courage to face the unknown future, and a deep, aching need for honesty, because she realized that love could only survive in truth, that nothing could remain hidden if they wanted to move forward together, and as the conversation stretched into evening, they moved from confrontation to understanding, from questioning to listening, from pain to tentative connection, and although the shadow of betrayal lingered, so did the spark of love, fragile but persistent, flickering in the depths of their hearts, reminding them that relationships were complex, that humans were imperfect, and that even in the wake of secrets, there was room for growth, healing, and rediscovery, and as Maya finally allowed herself to breathe, to feel without panic, she saw Arjun's hand reach toward hers, hesitant, unsure, but full of longing, and she didn't pull away immediately, instead letting it hover above her fingers, a silent question and answer all at once, a delicate offering of trust, and she realized in that moment that their journey was just beginning, that the aftermath of discovery would be long and winding, but that love, genuine love, could be resilient enough to survive if nurtured carefully, if honesty was practiced relentlessly, and if hearts were willing to remain open even when wounded. And as night fell and the city outside grew quiet, they sat together, hands almost touching, hearts beating unevenly, silently acknowledging that the road ahead would be uncertain, filled with challenges and moments of doubt, but also with opportunities for connection, growth, and renewed intimacy, and Maya knew that the choice to confront, to listen, and to try had set the stage for a new chapter in their lives, one where secrets no longer ruled, where honesty and vulnerability would take center stage, and where the possibility of rebuilding love was as real as the ache she still felt in her chest, and in that heavy, quiet, intimate space, she realized that the hardest moments could also be the most transformative, that heartbreak could lead to deeper understanding, and that even in the shadow of betrayal, there was a path forward, lit by the fragile but enduring flame of love, and as she finally leaned back on the sofa, exhausted but determined, she whispered quietly to herself, barely audible, "We can do this. if we try, and Arjun, sitting opposite her, eyes wet but steady, whispered in return, I'll do whatever it takes, and in that exchange, silent and unspoken as much as it was spoken, the first threads of reconciliation began to weave themselves, fragile but promising, delicate but unbroken, and Maya knew, with both fear and hope entwined in her chest, that life and love had changed forever, but perhaps, just perhaps, for the better. In the days following the confrontation, Maya found herself drifting through life like a ship caught in shifting tides, unable to settle, unable to find a calm harbor, and every familiar corner of her world suddenly seemed tinged with uncertainty. The apartment that had once been warm and comforting now feeling both intimate and suffocating as she moved from room to room, touching objects that reminded her of the life she had shared with Arjun, wondering how much of it had been real, how much had been built on half-truths and hidden emotions, and even the simple routines, making coffee, watering the plants, brushing past Arjun in the hallway, carried the weight of new meaning, each glance and gesture now layered with questions, suspicion, and longing, and despite the ache of betrayal that still pulsed in her chest, she couldn't deny the residual warmth that lingered from years of love, the softness of memory that made her heart twist in conflicting directions, and she spent hours walking through the city, seeking clarity in quiet cafes, under flickering streetlights, and along empty riverbanks, hoping that solitude would untangle the knot of emotions inside her, and everywhere she went, images of Arjun haunted her, not as a man who had deceived her entirely, but as a human being, vulnerable, flawed, full of love and regret, and it was this duality that tormented her most, because the man she loved was also the man who had kept secrets, and reconciling the two seemed almost impossible. Yet the heart does not easily abandon love, especially when it has been nurtured for years, and so she wandered through neighborhoods, tracing streets they had walked together, remembering laughter, shared jokes, quiet dinners, and late-night conversations, and with each memory, the pain and longing grew more complex, a tapestry of emotion that left her both comforted and fractured, and in the quiet of the night, she would find herself at small parks where they had picnicked or benches where they had sat under stars, fingers brushing lightly over surfaces that held echoes of their past, and she often wondered if Arjun felt the same tumult, if he too was replaying moments, struggling with guilt, yearning for forgiveness, or if he had simply moved forward, leaving the past untouched in his mind. And this uncertainty gnawed at her, filling her nights with restless dreams where shadows of the hidden letters and photographs merged with the warmth of his smile, creating a confusing mix of fear, hope, longing, and nostalgia. And during this time, Arjun gave her space, sending occasional messages, leaving small notes, and offering gestures of kindness that reminded her of his presence, but never pressing, never demanding, allowing her the room to feel, to process, to decide. And these small acts of patience made her heart ache in a different way, a bittersweet reminder that love was still alive, fragile and flickering, yet undeniably there, waiting for acknowledgement. And one evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, painting the city in shades of orange and rose, Maya found herself standing outside a small garden they had once visited together, a place filled with memories of laughter, quiet talks, and moments of tenderness. And as she looked at the wrought iron gate, her fingers lightly brushing its cool surface, she felt a wave of longing, a deep desire to reconnect, to understand, to feel again the closeness they once shared, yet fear kept her rooted, reminding her of the hurt, the secrecy, the betrayal, the fact that the man she loved had hidden a part of his life from her. And as she stood there, torn between hope and hesitation, she noticed something new pinned to the tree at the entrance, a small envelope with her name written in familiar handwriting, and her heart caught, uncertain whether to feel anger, curiosity, or hope. And as she carefully opened the envelope, she discovered a letter, each word carefully chosen, pouring forth Arjun's soul in a way that words on a page rarely could, filled with regret, longing, vulnerability, and unspoken promises. And as she read, tears blurred her vision, hot and sudden, streaming down her cheeks, a mixture of sorrow for the pain he had caused and a strange relief that at last, he was speaking openly, exposing the truth of his emotions, fears, and love. And the letter recounted his mistakes, his hidden connections, his desire to protect her from worry while acknowledging that his actions had only caused hurt. And with each line, Maya felt the weight on her chest ease slightly, the storm inside her mind calming just enough to allow a glimpse of understanding. and she remembered the nights they had spent wrapped in each other's arms, the quiet mornings sipping tea, the laughter that had echoed through their apartment, and she realized that despite everything, the love they shared was not entirely lost, that within the hurt, there remained a thread strong enough to hold them together if they chose to grasp it, and she felt an ache, both for what had been broken and for the possibility of repair. The kind of ache that made the heart heavy yet tender, and she folded the letter gently, pressing it to her chest, breathing in deeply, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotion, when she finally turned to find Arjun standing a few steps away, silent, watching her with a mix of fear, hope, and longing in his eyes, the kind of look that makes you feel simultaneously safe and exposed, vulnerable yet cherished, and for a moment, neither spoke, the silence stretching long and intimate. A bridge between them that carried both past pain and future possibility, and then slowly, she took a step toward him, then another, feeling the grass under her feet, the cool evening air brushing against her skin, and as she reached him, their hands touched. Fingers intertwining hesitantly, a delicate promise of connection and reconciliation, and in that touch, the world seemed to pause, the city sounds fading, leaving only the rhythm of their hearts, uneven but beating together. And she felt a flood of memories, moments of love, and flashes of pain, a collage of emotions that made her eyes well again, yet this time, tears were mingled with hope, not only sorrow, and she whispered softly, barely audible over the evening breeze, "I read your letter." And Arjun nodded, voice trembling, "I meant every word, Maya. I want to make this right," and the sincerity in his tone, the vulnerability of his admission, made her chest tighten with a mix of fear, love, and cautious optimism, and for hours, they stood in the garden, talking quietly, walking slowly among the flowers, sharing words that had been held back, confessing emotions they had bottled up, exploring the depth of both pain and love, and Maya realized that this was the turning point, the moment where heartbreak began its slow transformation into understanding, where secrets lost their power and honesty began to rebuild bridges, and although the path ahead was uncertain, filled with potential setbacks, lingering doubts, and the shadows of mistrust, she felt a strange but undeniable lightness, a reminder that love was resilient, that hearts could mend, and that even in the aftermath of betrayal, connection could be restored if nurtured with patience, compassion, and unwavering truth. And as night deepened, and stars twinkled faintly above, Maya and Arjun walked slowly back toward the apartment, hands still lightly intertwined, feeling both fragile and stronger, knowing that their journey was far from over, but confident that the first steps toward healing had begun, and in that quiet, shared space, Maya allowed herself to feel hope, the kind that whispers that love, when sincere and patient, can survive even the shadows of secrets, and as they reached their doorstep, she looked at him, eyes glistening, and saw the same mixture of fear and hope mirrored in his gaze, and in that reflection, she felt a tentative peace, a fragile yet glowing promise that together, they could navigate the complexities of love, trust, and redemption. And she realized that the most profound connections often emerged not from perfection, but from the willingness to face mistakes, embrace vulnerability, and hold tightly to love even when it feels uncertain. And with one final deep breath, she stepped inside, ready to continue the journey, ready to confront the aftermath of discovery, ready to rebuild, and in the quiet of their apartment, surrounded by the memories of past happiness and the shadow of past secrets, Maya felt the pulse of possibility, the fragile but persistent beat of hope, and knew that love, when nurtured with honesty and patience, could rise again from even the deepest storms. The days and weeks after the garden conversation became a delicate dance of healing for Maya and Arjun, each day carrying both the weight of the past and the promise of rebuilding, and Maya found herself waking with a mixture of hope and trepidation, unsure whether today would feel heavy with doubt or lighter with understanding, yet she determined to face it all with an open heart, taking each small step carefully, observing Arjun's actions, noting his gestures of sincerity, the little notes left on her pillow, the gentle texts checking if she had eaten, the way he paused in doorways to smile at her, a quiet patience that contrasted sharply with the whirlwind of betrayal she had endured, and as she began to process the complexity of emotions, the lingering hurt, the undeniable love, the cautious optimism, she realized that trust could only grow when nurtured slowly, consistently, and honestly, and she began to notice changes in herself as well, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly, the tight knot in her chest loosening with each small gesture of honesty, and she allowed herself to remember the past not only as a series of moments tainted by secrets but as a mosaic of genuine love, laughter, and tenderness, understanding that the man she loved had faltered but had not abandoned their connection. And one evening, as the sky turned soft shades of pink and gold, Maya found herself standing in the same garden where they had first begun to reconnect, the air carrying the scent of flowers and rain, memories pressing gently against her heart, and in that quiet, sacred space, she unfolded a letter Arjun had left for her, words flowing across the page like a confession and a plea, each line expressing regret for mistakes, longing for her understanding, and a deep, unshakable love that had not faded despite the mistakes he had made. And as she read, tears spilled freely, warm and cleansing, washing away some of the anger and replacing it with a cautious hope, the kind that whispered that reconciliation was possible if both hearts remained open, and she could feel her heart softening, the walls around it cracking gently, allowing light and love to seep back in. And when she looked up, she saw Arjun standing a few steps away, hesitant yet hopeful, his eyes reflecting the same mixture of fear and longing she carried, and she realized that trust, though fragile, could begin to mend with patience, honesty, and genuine effort. And in that moment, she felt a surge of courage, a willingness to try, to rebuild, to let love grow once more, even if it meant walking carefully, step by step, through vulnerability and uncertainty. And over the following days, they continued these quiet rituals of reconnection, sharing conversations that were longer, deeper, more honest than they had ever allowed themselves before, sitting across the table at breakfast and speaking not only about schedules or chores but about feelings, hopes, and fears, the hidden corners of their hearts coming to light gradually, safely. And Maya felt the relief of transparency, the comfort of seeing Arjun's effort mirrored in her own, the unspoken promise that mistakes could become lessons, that love could be strengthened through challenge, and that the bond they shared, though tested, was resilient, capable of withstanding storms if nurtured. And as they walked through their city, holding hands again, visiting cafes, small parks, and quiet corners where memories had once been made, Maya felt both the sting of past pain and the thrill of rediscovery, each laugh shared, each smile exchanged, a gentle reinforcement of connection. And sometimes, when they sat in silence, she could feel the unspoken apologies, the tentative forgiveness, the tentative trust, like a fragile bridge being rebuilt between two hearts, strong enough to support them if they moved slowly, carefully, intentionally. And the nights, too, became a space for healing, for gentle touch, for reassurance without pressure, the kind of intimacy that spoke of emotional closeness rather than physical indulgence. And Maya found herself falling into moments of quiet contentment, noticing how their conversations lingered, how their hands brushed naturally, how the smallest gestures, pouring tea, holding a door, brushing a stray hair behind an ear, became profound acts of love. And she realized that love was not perfect, that even in imperfection, it could be beautiful, and that rebuilding trust was an act of courage and devotion that required daily choice, daily effort, and daily vulnerability. And one evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, she found herself once again in the study, the same room where her discovery had begun, yet this time the air felt lighter, not heavy with secrets but with understanding. And Arjun approached quietly, sitting beside her without words, letting the silence speak volumes, the comfort of proximity, the reassurance of shared breath, the acknowledgement of pain and hope intertwined. And in that quiet moment, Maya felt a shift, a subtle yet profound sense that they were moving forward together, the past acknowledged, the present embraced, the future uncertain but promising. And she reflected on how far they had come, from the shock of betrayal to the tentative steps of reconciliation, from silence and suspicion to openness and dialogue. And she felt a mix of exhaustion, relief, and cautious optimism, the kind that comes after surviving emotional storms and choosing to continue, to fight for love rather than abandon it. And she realized that the letter he had left, the small gestures of care, the patient listening, and his unwavering presence had created a space for her to heal, to forgive, and to reconnect not only with him but with her own heart, understanding that love is as much about resilience as it is about passion, as much about effort as it is about affection. And over the following weeks, they continued this journey, sharing laughter, small adventures, long talks, quiet nights, and moments that reminded them why they had fallen in love in the first place. and Maya noticed how the shadows of doubt had begun to fade, replaced by a cautious but growing trust, a sense that, while scars remained, they did not have to define the whole story, and that the lessons learned could strengthen rather than weaken the bond they shared. And she saw in Arjun a man committed to transparency, to honesty, to nurturing their love with deliberate care. And she saw in herself the willingness to embrace both vulnerability and hope, understanding that rebuilding a relationship required patience, courage, and mutual effort. And as the city lights twinkled through the apartment windows, casting soft reflections across the walls, Maya and Arjun sat together on the couch, hands lightly touching, hearts beating unevenly yet in rhythm, exchanging quiet smiles, acknowledging pain and progress, and feeling the warmth of connection growing stronger with each shared moment. And in that silence, filled with unspoken words, tentative trust, and lingering love, they both understood that the journey was far from over, that mistakes could still cast shadows, that healing would require constant attention, yet also that the foundation they were rebuilding was real, tangible, and promising, capable of supporting love that was wiser, stronger, and more compassionate than before. And Maya felt a deep, steady calm for the first time in weeks, a gentle reassurance that love, even after betrayal, could endure, could grow, could thrive if nurtured with patience, honesty, and care. And as she leaned back, feeling Arjun's presence beside her, she allowed herself to breathe fully, to feel both the ache of past hurt and the warmth of present hope, realizing that life had tested them, love had challenged them, and yet here they were, together, walking a delicate line between memory and possibility. And in that delicate, quiet, emotional space, Maya understood that the aftermath of her discovery had been unbelievable, not because of destruction, but because it had revealed the resilience of love, the strength of vulnerability, the beauty of forgiveness, and the power of hearts willing to try again. And as the night deepened, she whispered softly, almost to herself, "We survived this together." And Arjun, feeling the same unspoken truth, gently squeezed her hand, his eyes reflecting relief, remorse, and a renewed devotion. And in that shared understanding, they both felt the quiet triumph of love reclaimed, fragile yet enduring, tentative yet real. And in the soft hum of the apartment, with memories of pain and hope intertwined, Maya and Arjun began to step fully into a new chapter, one marked not by perfection, but by honesty, resilience, trust, and the unwavering decision to keep loving, keep listening, and keep building a bond that could withstand storms and embrace joy, heartbreak, and hope alike, a love reborn in the quiet, deliberate choices made after secrets were uncovered, a love that now, more than ever, felt alive, precious, and infinitely worth holding on to.